Hi, my name is Lorraine Watry and welcome to my studio. I am a watercolor artist and I've worked with watercolor for 26 years now, and I thought I would start a new series of videos where I go over different tips, tricks, and techniques for working with watercolor. And hopefully these short videos will help you in your journey, and if you have a question or a technique that you would like to see, please comment below and I will try to accommodate that in a future video. Hi, today's video is going to be a continuation of the Choosing a Color for Watercolor series. I started that last week, and last week's video went over looking at reference photos and kind of my thought process as I was trying to figure out what colors I might use. And then this week's video is going to be a continuation of that. And I am going to talk about different color properties, things like transparent, semi-opaque or semi-transparent, and opaque, and also granular versus non-granular. And then I will also discuss vibrant versus neutral or grayed down color. And so I'm going to start with talking about transparent versus semi-transparent or opaque, and I have kind of a layout with a black ink marker on here. Kind of looks like a funny meme or something. And so I'm going to start by just giving you a little bit of information that you might see in a watercolor chart that companies put out. And in Daniel Smith's watercolor chart, they use a circle, but I know some other charts use a square. So don't worry about the shape of this, but basically in the Daniel Smith chart, and I would look at the key for each chart that you're maybe looking at, an open circle is transparent. So that means that the color, and I won't write the whole word because I don't have enough room between these, but basically the color is allowing the light that is basically hitting the paper to come back through that paint, and you get kind of a glow from it. Semi-transparent on their chart is noted with a half circle, and could be semi-transparent or semi-opaque depending on how much of the mix that they've used, or how much different things are in the pigment that could make it more opaque or more transparent, or just the color that is made up of that paint and how transparent or opaque it is. And then opaque would be a solid black circle, meaning that the light is not getting through. So I'll go ahead and just note that. And then it can depend on the brand of paint. It can depend on the fillers. Your student grade pigments, most of them will have some kind of a filler in them, which means it is kind of a chalky substance that is used to kind of take the place of some of the pigment. And so you're not getting as much pigment in the student grade paints, and it also will be more opaque looking, and which means less light is coming through that pigment, and also can affect the look of the color because they can feel a little more muddy or muted, kind of flat looking when you're painting with them. So on my palette, I have chosen to remove the opaque pigments because I want to paint with transparent pigments. I want the light of the paper to glow through the watercolor paint, and this is just an example of some of the colors on my palette, and you get a very vibrant look from them. And some are semi-transparent or semi-opaque, so this is not purely transparent, but they are somewhere a range between transparent to semi, so in these two areas. So on this list, the burnt sienna is semi-transparent, the permanent alizarin is transparent, the quin rose is transparent, new gamboge, sorry I had to look, is transparent, aureolin is transparent, and phthalo is I'm going to have to turn my palette because I can't remember. Phthalo is transparent, cobalt is semi-transparent, and ultramarine on the end here is transparent. And I was just looking at, oh, it's maybe semi-transparent. The Aureolin that I have on my palette now is by Holbein, and they have a different labeling system, and I think theirs is showing that it's semi-transparent. So they range anywhere, like I said, from from transparent to semi-transparent. All right, so I'll move that, and then I wanted to show a couple things having to do with the transparency of the pigment and or the opaqueness. And so I will use my Quinn Rose as the first example, and it is a transparent red. So this is the Quinn Rose, and I will try to get it as kind of fully out of the palette as I can, as not a lot of water, more pigment in the mix, just so that you can kind of get a little more of a scientific look at this. And I do have my board tipped just a little bit, so it might end up being a little lighter at the top than it is the bottom. The paint might flow down just a little. And then I have Parole Scarlet on my palette. Every other red that I have on my palette is transparent. Oh, actually Carmine. I think I'm going to go Carmine instead of the Parole Scarlet. So Carmine is a cooler red, and I do really like it. I just don't use it that often. So this is Carmine, or Carmen. And I used a permanent marker and drew a line on the paper. Just made it wide enough that we could see. So I've kind of loaded that up same way, just trying to get the color out of the palette with not a lot of water. In fact, I think I'm going to take it off the board so that the pigment will kind of remain in the middle and not pool. So I'm going to go back over the Quinn Rose just to make sure that I've got the color everywhere and it's evenly dispersed. And then since I took off opaque pigment, I found a tube that I had in my stash of cadmium red deep, and the cadmium colors are no longer being produced, I believe. I don't know if all companies are doing that, but most are, because they are considered a poison, cadmium is. And so it was kind of dangerous for people to be manufacturing it and mining it, and then artists to be using them. So just kind of be careful with that. And this is going to be a warmer red. The other two were cooler reds, kind of leaning toward purple or blue. And this red is leaning a little more toward orange. But it is also an opaque color. And so I'm just kind of mixing up the paint, getting it all blended together, and then I'll bring it over. Now, I think pretty quickly you can see the difference between those three. And it does slowly get so that you can't see that black line as well. And they are not dry yet, but as they dry, that difference will remain. Now, I have not had any issues mixing a transparent color with a semi-transparent or semi-opaque color. I have not done a lot of mixing with an opaque color and one of those. I have in the past mixed cad red with some other things, so I'll try the cadmium deep with a yellow. And I think I will use my New Gamboge for this because it is, I don't know, let me check. It's going to say, yeah, my New Gamboge is transparent and my Hansa light and my Hansa medium that are over here are semi-transparent, and so is the Aureolin. So to find a transparent yellow that's on my palette, I'm going to use the New Gamboge, and I will start with the Quin Rose and just bring some over and make, well, I'm going to need a little more yellow in it. Get some more of the New Gamboge. Okay, make an orange, and I'll just put that here. So this is a transparent and a transparent. Actually, what I should do is make a dark line, and I'll give it just a few seconds to start to dry. Okay. And then I will pull the color across it. So one of the things to think about is when I am painting, I want that glow of the paper to show through my watercolors. So when the light hits the painting, the white of the paper kind of glowing through will make the painting feel more vibrant and lively. And I find that I don't care for the flatter kind of chalky or I'm not sure how to say it, but the flatter look of an opaque color. Now, I know there are some artists that really like working with opaque pigment, and they have a style that really works for that. And so it's not that you can't decide that that's your way of doing it and that you want to work that way. It just isn't the way I like to paint with watercolor. Okay, so that is a transparent and a transparent. This next one will be, I'll use the carmine and the transparent New Gamboge. So carmine is semi-transparent again. And go ahead and make this color. Now, one thing that we can't compare right now is that this red is a little warmer than the other two. So depending on the red or the mix that you're making, your pigment might look a little more neutral because these reds are leaning a little more toward purple or blue. They're not going to make as vibrant a mix as a red that may be already leaning toward orange. So when I make a mix of the New Gamboge and the the cadmium red deep, then depending on how this mixes, because I have not made this mix before, actually it's a little dark, pull a little more of the New Gamboge out, then it might look more vibrant than the other two, but it also has that opaque paint in there that could make it feel flatter or maybe not as vibrant because of the opaque quality of the red. Okay, so those are maybe not exactly equal. This one actually doesn't have a very vibrant look to it. It's a little more neutral feeling. And these other two are slightly more vibrant, even though they're made with a red that is slightly cooler. And you can still see that the black line, I think, even in the video, that the black line is slightly covered by that pigment. So you would not get that same glow through the paper. So for transparent, semi-opaque, and opaque, if you want to paint with opaque colors, I would use them sparingly, and I would also think about the fact that once that opaque color is down, it will block color that is below it. So if I put, I will use a staining color. So I'm going to use some phthalo blue. And phthalo is a very staining pigment, and it will have to dry. So I'll give it a few seconds to dry, and then I can come back and show this next thing I was going to mention. So pull that across there, and I'll just let that dry, and then I can add some paint on top of that. So while that's drying, I am going to go over to this area and talk about granulation. So depending on your pigment, you might have colors that are granular, and basically granular means that it has parts of the pigment that are heavier and that will drop to the surface and leave little bits of color, little kind of look sandy or something in your paint. It won't maybe be a smooth passage of color. And one of the easiest ways for me to show you granulation is with some of the Daniel Smith Primatech colors that are on my palette. And also, if I am using a wet on wet type of technique, then, so I'm just placing some water on the paper, the granulation is even more prevalent. Now, most of the pigments on, well, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say maybe half or to a third or somewhere around in there are, on my palette, are granular. And I'm just letting the water just kind of grab that paint. I'll add a little more pigment to it. Now, this is Green Apatite Genuine, and it is a very granular pigment in the Primatech series. And as it dries and separates, you will see parts of the paint that are browner and parts that are greener. And that paint will really show some granulation. In your normal paints, if you don't have any of the Primatech brand, you might notice that all of the earth tones are very granular. A lot of the blues are granular, and some of the other colors on your palette might have some granulation. So sap green is granular, and I would just read the charts that your brand, the company and the brand of paint you are using. You can look them up online and see if it talks about granulation, and that can help you know if the pigment that you're going to paint with is granular. I'm going to take up a little bit of the moisture out of this one so it doesn't take as long to dry. This pigment is Sodalite Genuine, and it is almost black, and it is very granular, and it is a cooler black, and I just really like the granulation in it. I like the color of it. And so I'll just let those guys sit there and do their thing. And so granulation is not something that I worry about. I like having those little bits of pigment in parts of the painting to give a little bit of texture and interest to the area. If you're not liking granulation, then you may have to investigate what paints maybe have, what pigment colors have less granulation and or none, and then just try to work around the look of granulation. And like I said, some are more granular than others, and also if you paint wet and wet, you notice the granulation more. One of a recent addition to my palette is Phthalo Blue Turquoise, and it is a very pretty turquoise color, and I believe I will read my palette right quick, and I just did a video on talking about how I label my palette, so it's on there. Yeah, it says it's non-granular, and then I will compare it to Cobalt, and Cobalt Blue is kind of my blue that is my primary blue, because it is sort of in the middle. It's not too toward green like the turquoises are, and it's not toward the purples like ultramarine and some of the blues that are on that side, ultramarine deep and ultramarine. And so this is Cobalt, and Cobalt is granular, and so comparatively, as they dry, you might be able to see that a little more. Okay. So for me, I like the granulation, and I think it's very interesting. And as I said, I use it, and I don't try to separate out the fact that something might be granular over not granular. And let me go ahead and dry this. So I will be right back, and then I will finish up. All right, so back to the transparent versus opaque, or somewhere in between. And I have the phthalo blue line down at the bottom. And phthalo, like I said, is a staining color. So that is another property of watercolors that you might consider when you're choosing what colors to use in your painting. Staining colors tend to take over mixes. So you just need to be a little cautious when you're making a mix, so that you are getting the color you want, and just know that the staining color like phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, carbazole violet that are on my palette, I think ultramarine turquoise, some of those colors are going to want to take over and be more dominant in the mix, and so I have to be cautious when I'm using them in a mix. And then there are good properties about staining colors, so they are harder to lift. And so if I decide I want something where I place the color down and I want to not have it move when I'm painting other colors over it, not that, you know, you can paint over other colors, but it's just going to be harder to move and cause that color to lift, then I might consider using phthalo blue over maybe peacock, which is another turquoise color that I have in my palette. So just to show the difference in the look of the layers, so I can use the Quin Rose over the phthalo blue, and you can see some of the phthalo, and actually it did lift a little bit because I think that corner was a little wet still. It was a little thicker over there. And but you can see the phthalo through that. And then I'll use some of the carmine in this area. And then I'll use some of the opaque cadmium red deep. And I did find a really good blog post that someone had done, and I will link that in the information below. That is, it was talking about transparent versus opaque color, and I thought it had some good information in there. So because this one was a little wet, I ended up getting a purple rather than a red, but you can still see the turquoisey blue through there. This one is still drying, and as it dries, you'll be able to see a little more of the phthalo blue in that layer below. And then this one, because I'm using that opaque red, I'm only seeing a touch of the blue on that upper edge because the pigment is pooling down here. The paper is buckled just a touch, and so where the pigment is laying that's heavier, you lose that blue glow that's coming through. So just so that you're aware of those qualities, and then I would give some experimentation. If you have an opaque color that you really love, I would try it, and also try it in mixes. See if you like the color that it mixes. So these two colors are a little more vibrant than this mix that I made with the opaque color, and they just glow a little more. This looks a little flatter. Again, it might be what you're thinking you might want to paint. So I tend to try to save my lights and or paint around them. And if I have a light value, so a yellow or a light orange or light blue or whatever, then I don't care to use opaque pigment on top of the color later to try to bring that light back into a painting. I try to reserve them or paint around them. And then the granular pigments, this one dried a little funny, so unfortunately it's not showing the granulation as much. This one is working pretty well, and you can see all the little dots and things that are in there. And The last thing is whether or not a color is vibrant or vibrant, or it is more neutral or grayed down. And so you can use a variety of ways to neutralize or gray down a color, but I can take my Quin Rose and I could use a little bit of a gray that I have on my palette to neutralize it a little bit. I'll go ahead and bring some over. So this is just the straight Quin Rose by itself. And then I can take a color and gray it down. So this might be where this color is more in a shadow, or it's maybe a part of the, or the image is dealing with a night scene, or just, you know, you want not that color, but you want something that's a deeper value because of where it is. Colors that are a little more vibrant generally are come toward the eye. So if you want something to be pushed back and not as important, then you might gray it down. And then the other way I could do it is use the opposite color, which in this case is green. So I could take a little bit of my sap green and add it to the rose, and I get a more neutral color. So depending on how much I have of each color in there, I don't want it to look green. So you can have a vibrant color, and then you can mute it or gray it down depending on where it is in the painting, what the light is, all of that. And so there are different aspects to pigments that are good to investigate and to know. And I will leave it at that. And then next week, I am going to show my color study of the bee and flower that has to do with this color, choosing colors for a painting. And I will not maybe do the whole thing, but I'll just show a portion of it and give you an idea of how I would figure that out. And that will be the third video for Choosing Colors series. And if you have a tip, trick, or technique that you would like to see in watercolor, please leave a comment below and I will add it to my video list. And I hope you have a good day. See you later. Bye.